perspective of having to sign them all the time. So, no, and I always wondered, you know, because sometimes there is an urgency to that stuff, and if you can't get hold of one of us to sign, so I'm all in favor of it.
We actually have to convene the board the way it's set up now, and you know, we had one on the sewage lift station that had failed, and we went ahead and did it because it was an emergency. And we can call it an emergency meeting, but for something this routine and now 15 years, if there's any deviation from the standard license or any exemptions or variances, we bring it to the board. But just for, like we do the temporary construction, within the constraints of that standardized license, and I'll get with staff to make sure that we have the same language that you guys used in the temporary construction license that Mr. Spearman.
Oh, you did?
Yes, we did that a long time.
You better check it closely. Do I hear a motion to approve item, what is it, 6H?
So moved.
All right, Larry makes a motion, George second. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, district engineer.
All right, good news. So,
You have a smile after 30 years.
well, timing is the only thing that's preventing us from not having a bigger smile, but we'll get there. So this is today. So the committee met yesterday and authorized the allocation. Our allocation is 104,606. That includes the balance that was carried over from last year, the conserved water. The allocation balance is not zeroed out anymore. It just carries on one year to the next. And so that plus some. I was talking to Robert earlier. This all has happened very quickly because of the water's been. We delayed this as long as we could to get as much water in the reservoir to make it work. So we've got our effluent in there, our production days, our supplemental wells we're using those to the maximum for that time period. And of course, at this number, which is 18 inches, is way above what we had 2 months ago. So that's good. That's why we waited until now, so we could come up with the loads. The only difficulty is that under the 2001 contract, that is below 2 feet, so there's no ability to sell any of the water to the city, the conserved water to the city at this time. So this is the number. I think Robert, if you want to join me, if you have comments on it, I think we'll just sort of combine both of our stuff right now. And I'm all for making an allocation of 1.5.
I'm for it, yeah.
And then I'm going to talk about the future here in a minute. But this, of course, we only allocate on what we have in storage and available to us with our facility. So we have effluent available to us, and we have our wells available. Those are in here in the Mount Store. We have a reserve of 15,000 acre feet for when we're the only ones on the river and we're paying for the losses, or if we're the only one on the beginning. So that's a little cushion that is in there for this. But unless the board wants to, that is not an unreasonable cushion to have. We've been seeing numbers like that. It just depends on how long EPCWID stays on when they go off, and that's very hard to predict. Last year it was close to this number, but we ran for a long time.
So I have one question. That would give us 3 small track irrigations? Four that we could schedule?
Right. 4 small tracks.
Yes, you should dedicate.
So it's the issue here is 18 inches.
With me, I mean, that's our first initial allotment, because before we didn't have anything to allot really. And too bad it's come so late. It's because it's caused a lot of land to be laid fallow that we didn't know. So when we deal in realities, that's one thing we've always done here is deal in realities, not in projections, because you never have a clue what's going on.
We only had 6 inches 2 months ago, so this is
But I say, very
See,
little.
these have resolutions.
Anyway, I sure have no problem with it. I don't know about the rest of the board.
17 and 18, that's 4.
I don't know how well it's gonna get 4 feet out of it.
what are we talking about?
Number 18.
You'll do it?
The small track 5. Figure it out.
No, that was
Figured
a
it out.
mistake. We were
Oh,
sorry.
it was a mistake.
Yeah, it
So I hear a motion to approve the 1.5
It's all
foot,
automatic.
acre foot allotment.
Used to, no.
Oh,
We were looking at that.
I have a motion to approve it as 1.5 foot. Do I hear a second? Larry, second. Did you get who, Art made the motion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign.
Then, for the board only, I know, usually we won't do this in the meetings this afternoon, we'll do it differently than this, but so if we run these numbers, under a very high probability for the allocation on, July 7th, for the July board meeting, which is, that's typically gonna be someplace between 30 and 45 days of snow melt events. And unless it's an extremely cold summer, which I don't think it will be, it hasn't historically, we haven't seen that. In fact, we expect, I know it's cold up there right now, we, in Georgia, we're talking about, we expect there's gonna be a flip, and when it flips, it does fast, right? We go from 20 degrees to 80 degrees.
This is the perfect scenario.
Yeah. And, so, but this.
Doesn't mean it'll work, but it's a perfect scenario.
Yeah, it's not, this is pretty high probability. So that's what we have to have.
Key word is probability.
Right, exactly. We can't, it's not in the reservoir now. It's good. And, you know, we've had issues with losing a lot of snow. We're,
You never know.
so this is what we call a vector diagram. I know it doesn't have a whole lot of arrows in it, which are normally what people think of as vectors, things pointing different directions. But this, if you think about these curves that are up here, these are, if you follow them, we could replace each one of these dots with an arrow pointing which way the snow is accumulating. So this is from 86 to 2017, and this right there is where we are right now in this mess. So you can see that there's only 3 years that are higher.
There's only one at this juncture, right?
Well, yeah, at this time, there was only one. This stuff came later.
Which year was that?
That was 2005,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that tells you, you see that 2005 takes early snow melt, and there was some other issue. We got quite a bit of water in 2005. These are 86, this is our peak, so back there, back when it's flooding, this is 96. Or this is 85, and this is 96, I'm not sure the exact years, but in the time period. So these were the 2 big flood events, right? Remember those? We didn't have a flood event here, but you can see that abruptly it stopped snowing and it plummeted, melted early. It was an early melt. That's all right for us, but we're up to the point where we're looking in the 700,000 acre feet into the reservoir, of which we've already received about 150 of them, 120. And
Possible.
it's
Highly probable, but possible.
yeah, it's. I don't have a scenario where it doesn't occur in this time period, but that's only 86 to 27.
At least it's very encouraging.
Very encouraging. So just wanted you guys to see that.
First time.
And I hope everybody, I added you to the distribution list. We forgot to do that before, but gets the snow
Okay.
forecast and reservoir levels. So obviously we started off low. Here's our favorite station, so you can see the rapid growth. Here we were last year in the dismal result. These are long-term averages at that station, and here we just have taken off. And recently we're maintaining, and we've plateaued a little bit, but not too bad. It's a huge swing from last year. These epic swings are coming on. A little snow going on up there right now. Oh, good.
Major.
It just came from there.
and they're predicting in some areas 2 feet of snow tomorrow.
Right. So that's in this. So one thing about the NRCS forecast is they're, it's just the nature of forecasting. They're typically we found that the pendulum swings both ways. When they predict really bad low flows, it's never that bad, and when they predict really good, it's never that good. They're predicting 700,000 at the 50%, but 490 is at the low end. And of course, I used a lower number than that on that July forecast, close to 400, so even lower than these numbers. So everything is very high probability that we're going to get out. And we're seeing some low elevation snow melts already. These peaks at the San Marcial are from some of that. Some of this, there's irrigation activity going on already in the middle Rio Grande. Not really sure what they're
Yeah.
flooding.
You would have guessed it.
We get some of those dips are from that. And of course, our other watersheds, we're gonna see a lot of it coming out of the Choma. Yeah, that's where a lot of lower
That's good.
elevation snow
That's
is. So, and I understand, we had a meeting, a sidebar meeting at the breakfast, I guess, before the Rio Grande Compact with the Mill Grande Conservancy, and that they have maintenance issues on bottom dams, so they can't store
Right.
as much water.
They're going to do some maintenance this coming year,
Yeah. And so that means that they can't.
so they have to dry it out.
Shucks.
So they are pre-releasing, I guess, because they don't want to get up into the,
Don't have a flood.
yeah, they don't want the level to
Rust
get,
or
I guess there's, and I'm not familiar with the maintenance issues, but there was some structural area where
They don't wanna break
water-
the dam.
They don't want to break the
And then they're claiming that they're only gonna use 40 to 60,000 acre feet.
dam in that
We-
reservoir. I don't know about that. I wasn't sure what the 40 to 60,000 is, so that's my presentation, and answer any questions you guys might have. That's on that part of it. I have a part on the Rio Grande Compact.
We did vote, we did have it set,
Yeah.
right?
Did you vote? I think, did they take the vote on the, I think you did call the vote, right? The second item, and I'll go quick here. You can sand those in. So you can take this with you. So as you guys know, that we've been working for a lot longer than we had hoped. There's a committee that was formed for the a joint committee, EPCWID, the city of El Paso and this district, in regard to evaluation of reduced flow capacity of Rio Grande and the impact on operations. So the internal draft is out for review. There's a third party that we hired the committee hired to review it, another engineer. We have an expert look at it, and then it's gone to the city and the two districts. I'll be done, I guess, today, end of day with our review, and then it goes to the boundary commission. So there may be some minor changes to this. It's still a draft, and it's gonna go, we decided that it would be best, in lieu of the cooperation and the progress made in the last year by the boundary commission, to provide this draft to them for their comments before it becomes public. Once they have a chance to comment on it, then it goes to the Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the general public. So the general conclusions, I'm gonna go to the very end and just go over the recommendations, and there's a lot of recommendations, but would be the big ones. So priority one is the removal of all vegetated sandbars from the channel. As you guys know, I've made numerous presentations on the establishment. What we found about those is that now that they've become established, that they do affect the flood capacity of the river significantly. We sort of thought, from looking at it, you could sort of say that. Number two, which is a little more surprising, is that we're having geometric growth, which is normal in a biological system. You see that, that the fact that there's ample sediment in the systems, the sediment's accumulated. We are back to pre-Rio Grande Compact channelization conditions. The amount of sediment we calculated from Anthony to American Dam is almost equal to what it was before they built the channelization project. We still have a main channel. That channel was eroded wider than it was when they built it, and so that accounts for some of the problem. And now the sand's accumulated from 2 to 4 feet. And but we still have some working depth in that channel, but much less than the original working depth. And it's wider, so that means that there's more sediment, more space to put sediment, so that causes a problem. I don't know if we can narrow it down. It's very difficult and expensive, but it turns out that it's from using standard engineering cost estimates, that it's relatively cheap to remove vegetation. So that's the first thing. So that'll help the flow capacity, and we got to keep it out. The estimate for that is really pretty small. There's about 30 acres of those that have established. They're growing at about 40% a year. If they continue at that rate, we've got a serious problem. excuse me, 40% every 2 years.
Wait a minute, 30 acres from this,
Anthony to.
from just this, yeah, what we're looking at?
Yeah, on that.
Just in the channel, no,
Okay.
Just in the main channel.
All right,
it's
all right.
not very wide.
We hopefully don't have any.
Those are like islands now?
Yeah, we don't use the word islands because we have sandbars all the time, and so a sandbar forms, let me show you a picture of one. So the sandbar forms, and these are the flooded areas. But, sandbars are way back there. So this is one we evaluated, that sort of turned the rivers flowing from the top to the bottom. That's, I think, about 2 acres in size. It's a fairly
Wow.
big one. They look like amoebas or protozoas or something, right? But that's all from the streamlining, which you'd expect. And so they, obviously, what happens is as the vegetation is established, they grow on both ends. Sand accumulates and sand and protects, it slows the water down around the peripheral, you get reeds, and then it drops out, and then it drops out. It's just a feedback loop on doing it. And historically, these had all been removed on a regular basis. And for various reasons beyond the scope of this presentation, they hadn't been really from about 96. So they started very small and it took a long time, but once they reach a critical amount, and we see them grow to the point where you see this one off to the side here that's just starting,
Right.
that in a year or two that one will merge with the other one. And it's, so it becomes
You'll show them the picture on page 15, and they'll get an idea of how high that vegetation is.
sorry, I started at the end and, so. Yeah, it's a little hard to get in there, and it's woody vegetation, which is an issue.
You know, it took this huge report to call our attention to something you can see with your naked eye. I mean, you don't have to do a rocket science to tell that if we have a major flood event in the upper valley, it's going to be Lake Upper Valley, not the upper valley that everybody knows. And it's taken so long, and you have to go through all this stuff to get the boundary commissioners ones that are responsible for all this stuff. And Alan and them done a great job to try to get this thing done because they've just ignored it. And we had one commissioner, John Bernal, that came in from Arizona, and he was all for letting it grow back like it is.
Yeah, I think that's where it started.
It started, yeah. I promise you that.
Carlos Marin, who unfortunately died in an accident, for a short tenure as commissioner, was active. We were working very closely with him getting this solved, and then after that, it just stopped.
It just stopped, but it all started at that
Started,
point.
the person prior to him, and Ruth didn't do anything about it
That was from
either.
Arizona.
Bernal, Ruth, Marin.
And he accomplished it just back to pre-compact condition.
Yeah, this project was
Scary.
built right after the compact was signed. In fact, it was under construction when the compact was signed on setting up. So we spent a lot of time to make sure that we were well documented. The atmosphere's changed since then and we've got a much more cooperative, as Ms. Reyes said, and so, unfortunately, we're maybe part of the reasons because of this report, but we know that we spent many, many years, many meetings not making any progress, and then we started this as an alternative. And now maybe we wouldn't need it to. But I don't know
Well,
what else to say.
no, you need it, I mean, this really needs to be done because it makes it a matter of record, and there's always people that are against things like this. And this shows you have written document of the research that shows the necessity for doing it, because there'll be people that'll oppose it, I can assure you. And, but they don't realize, I mean, you know, everybody thinks, well, it never floods in El Paso. Well, it does. If it rains a lot on that mountain up there, it floods in a hurry. And if it happens that way, then this thing's gonna be a huge problem. And it hadn't, the excuse they always used, all the previous, the ones after Carlos, and early demise, was they couldn't get it in the money. There wasn't money in the budget, and the Congress would give it to them.
Yeah, well, it turns out the cost to remove these 30 acres is pretty minimal, about $700,000. That's even with environmental, and I doubled what it would cost us to remove. So that just needs to be done. So that's
Yeah, it's gotta be.
And then the maintenance of it is pretty small.
The Boundary Commission is responsible for the river all the way to Caballo.
That'll be more than
Right, but is
$700,000.
there a game plan? Is
there a schedule on areas?
Yeah, there is and it's in this report that the boundary had just, as of 30 days ago, released a schedule that I put in the report.
Okay,
And we just got it Friday, right?
right, that's Daniel.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're actually moving that, I'll talk to that in just a second. So the other technology that's now available is we acquired high resolution, high accuracy LiDARs. This is sort of a game changer. We've always had LiDAR, it's an elevation measurement device from an airplane, or it's used in automated cars, you know, in terms of the automated cars and other issues. So it basically creates a three-dimensional model of the surface of Earth. What's changed is the density that we're able to get measurements every 4 square feet, which is a huge amount of data. So these are terabytes of data. These are large amounts. We finally have processing power to work through. And now we can use it for cut and fill calculations very precisely. So if you have a pile of dirt sitting out in the yard out here, I can use this image to tell you how much dirt is in there within 2 to 3%. So same for the river now.
Good technology.
So we take these polygons like this one that's on here, and then it'll tell me exactly how much dirt is in that polygon down to a certain depth, and then we calculate what the average depth should be, the design grade depth in there, and then it'll tell us how much we have to dig out of that section. And so that gives us some very good estimates for the first time.
That section's gonna be a lot deeper than the part above it, so it's gonna be a lot.
It'll just fill in the next
Yeah,
year.
fill in.
And the idea is to clean the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
I've seen some of these, and these are conservative pictures, there's some.
There's some this size,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, it's been going on a long time. I don't know, that's gotta be 25 years ago when Benal was the commissioner.
We had to
At
spend
least
quite,
25 years ago.
Yeah.
we had spent quite a bit of time going back. This is the first year that the American Dam had been built in that smelter town, and I don't know where Juarez is. Juarez is missing. Juarez is right now Juarez is all over here, right?
Yeah.
But at that time in 1939, there was no
Is that
development.
what that picture is?
That's 1939 picture. That's the American Canal over here and the dam, and now of course all this is in the reclamation. It's all torn down many years ago.
That's the international, right?
No, that's American.
No, that's the American, the
Yeah,
international.
this is the brick plant over here in New Mexico. And that's all flat now, and part of it over here is the boundary commission's yard.
Yeah, that's the old smoker town.
Yeah, that's the dam, those are our gates, and none of that's really changed much. I knew it. So we went back and took all these old studies and recalculated what they have as-built, so what they actually built under that project. And so we said, okay, so what do we need to do to get it back to those conditions? And the boundary's been doing it. That's what it looks like today, in that same area. So you can see some resemblance. First you can see the big sandbar further.
Some similarities to that year.
The reason we use sandbars is because technically, I mean, to us, a comic book, you look at it, looks like an island out in the water, but an island from a geographical definition, from an environmental definition, has different context. It's something that typically is there for a long time period. These things have been there in some very short time periods, but the sandbars have always been there, and so we call them vegetated sandbars. We didn't want to run into people thinking that this is something that has historically always been there and will always be there. Like we expect the islands of Hawaii never to go away. Whereas we do expect these vegetated sandbars to go away. On setting it up. So yeah, a lot of work to do some of the analysis and try to figure out now we calculated those numbers 3 different ways and we came up with the same order of magnitude of sand. So I think that validates it.
What we need to do is get the boundary to do it.
And they've started. They have a pretty aggressive program. In fact, Danny might want to talk to that. They said that they did 300,000 at the Wayuka. Is that right?
I don't know if their estimates are quite exact, but
That's a little liberal, you say, but I don't have LiDAR down there, so I can't do the calculation. I wish I did. I would have run a number on doing that. But they claimed they did 500,000 last year, of which 300,000 was there. The maintenance numbers are about that you need to do someplace between, just in this Anthony reach, that you probably need to do someplace around 200,000 a year, just to keep up with it. But to start, you minimum do 1.2 million,
The
or
big,
1.7.
the big problem is where do you go with the sand?
Yeah, you know, it turns out that, you know, in the 1977, George, anybody remember George Bramali? George, he was the head of the technical group at the Boundary Commission. Ron Coo, the old Bramali, I think. He was there, I think he probably left about 2002 or something, 2000. Ganaji, back in those days, good.
I remember.
Don Rick, he was there. So anyways, George was really, I worked with him for years. And very capable guy. He wrote a report in '77 addressing that issue. And one of our recommendations here is that they go back to that report. And he showed all the boundary commission land that they own alongside the river and where you could store. Even though 1.7 million cubic yards sounds like a lot, it's really over a 100-acre field. It's a small one. And so as long as these piles are spread outside the levees, and it will raise the area, and it's clean fill, so there's not an issue. So, and then the city has volunteered use.
They're taking a lot.
You know, their Candy Field well field's a large area. They've acquired other land that we could spread. It's no longer irrigated. We could spread a lot. So there's places to move this. Yeah, sand out of the river, sand and silt out of the river.
Is there a possibility that sand could be conducive to concrete companies that could use that kind of sand? Or is that sand not good
No,
for
well, one thing with sand,
that kind of sand?
yeah, that kind of sand has got too much silt in it, so any clay or silt in a concrete project is very highly detrimental to it. So you'd have to wash it, and the amount of washing would be excessive. So that's the reason they use arroyo sand instead of river sand. It's just that there's too many fine particles.
I'm just trying to think of a place that could.
The sheriff's posse took a bunch of it.
I know, I saw that over there. But that, is there different pockets of sand that might be good for them?
No.
None. It's got
As
too
an
much stuff.
engineer, we would never accept sand.
Can you use as road base or something
No.
else?
They use it in the parks, the city has, they take in some and spread out of parks, but.
The money in large volume sediment removal, and I've done several really big projects of multi-million cubic yards, is in the distance you haul it, not in getting it out of the ground. Getting it out of the ground is just related to diesel.
Freight's always a big deal.
It's a haul distance.
Who's
So
responsible though?
the
The Boundary Commission removes the islands, can't just put them to the side.
Well, right now, that part of that's a relatively small amount of sediment, and it's mainly the vegetation we're trying to get removed from those, so we can keep the sand mobile. But there is a huge amount that's in the bed, and once we get the vegetation out, and that's a much bigger, that's about a $12 million estimate. This is the part that we have up there, remove the sediment from the bed. So that is mainly on the haul distance, and that's what that 77 report about was. What you do, when I do these big sediment moves, we come up with haul routes. You spend a lot of time figuring out where you're digging and where you're putting it and how to get it there. Because that's where the money is. And they had no more, I think for the Rio Grande project, that George had identified a total of 72 haul sites, trying to keep them as close to the excavation as possible. And we've added more to those still exist. And then we've added, in our area, which is critical, we've added the cities, or we're in the process of adding the cities to that. We did talk to John talking about that. So I think it's coming along very well. We did recommend in there that the boundary go ahead and do that type of engineering analysis, which they go ahead, we just did 2 sections of this river. They should do the whole thing by LiDAR, and they should do the whole haul route analysis. That'll give them a good estimate of what it costs to do that. But it is feasible. So we're looking at a less than $1 million for the vegetated islands and the maintenance of those things on a year. Here's 10 to 13 million for removal, is what our estimates were, preliminary estimates on doing that. It needs to be studied in more detail, so it's still very doable, but probably be spread out over 5 years. And then the third one is that there's a deficiency in the levee system, that this is really more from the city than from us, but it is serious enough that this came in here. There's already a study done for the Boundary Commission back in 2013. By the way, this study for this Candy Field wall goes back to when you were in high school there, right? I mean, it has been proposed, it's been a problem since day one. So this is a low spot, so what happens?
That was like 10 or 15 years ago.
About 25. This is a low spot that they, excuse me, there's several of these.
I always refer to it as 40 pounds ago, Al.
That's 40 Christmases, right? And Thanksgiving. So there's sort of the big picture of, so this box up here by the, in the Canyon 2 area. So what happens is that even though it's outside the city limits, once it reaches up there, it flows down to the, you know, water's gonna go, once you get outside the levee, it's going south. And so it goes south and causes big issues all the way down. It gets into the Montoya drain and then Vexus drain, and then it becomes a vehicle for just spreading. And so obviously you can't, you've got to have, the integrity of a levee system has to be all, the entire levee, not, you can't have a weakness. So there's one major, there's some other problems near the Canyon Rivers. These are well known.
That's the Corps of Engineers of the Mississippi.
Yeah, right. You break up, you break 20 miles upstream and flood people out when it's broke. Unfortunately, the cost was started back when you were in high school at being like about $7 million, and now for the same thing they estimated back then that they had built it, it's 64 million.
Oh, you said the LiDAR,
64 million.
the LiDAR mapping could be done on what, why hasn't, isn't it satellite based? The LiDAR?
It's aircraft based.
Oh, it's aircraft.
Yeah, you have to fly fairly low because we're trying to get accuracies within 1 or 2 inches
Yeah, vertical,
vertical.
yeah. So they have to fly the aircraft. Well, then, all they need to do is fly a little further. Right?
Somebody has to pay them, that's the problem.
Yeah, they go by the number of miles they fly.
You have to pay for it. That's-
We do have some older LiDAR, but it's not as precise.
Okay, yeah, they've got it to an inch vertical. Remember you and I discussed
Yeah,
it a couple of years ago, and I couldn't believe at that point they claimed 3 or 4 inches, I think.
Yeah, you know, TxDOT has some that I've used down, and when we did that culvert design for you, they produced LiDAR down there, and maybe they've got some that we can work.
And IBWC supposedly had it, but
We have some from 2014. It's about give or take 4 inches, and still reasonably accurate. But you know, for the stuff we were doing in this report, in flooding, 4 inches makes a big difference. So, especially if that's the last 4 inches going over the top
I
of
didn't
the
mean to derail you, I was just curious about that.
Yeah, so we're able to do stuff with this LiDAR that we haven't been able to do with the older LiDAR. But you know, I think all the new LiDAR is going to be this high quality from now on. I would estimate to fly from American Dam to the end of to Fort Equipment would be about $60,000, somewhere for like high resolution.
And the Bureau doesn't have that?
Well, it's not really a bureau deal; it's the boundary.
Oh, the boundary,
And they flew it back. FEMA flew it in what 2014.
2015, Chewy and I attended that conference in FEMA 2 weeks ago, and we had asked what year that LiDAR was done. They said 2015, so that's where all the studies were from.
Okay, Mr. Bragg, you moving along here?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Another time, I respond to board requests very rapidly.
We got one other item.
Yes, the third party, we passed out a list there, so we had approximately 20 projects from third party folks going on within the district's right of ways. And we're about 80% complete. The remaining should be finished up next week, or we gave them till the week of April 15th due to obviously the delay in the release. So we've got a sewer line down here on North Loop by Warsham being finished up, and the wasteways are pouring that on Thursday, pumping all of that. This TxDOT project, it's on here, it's ongoing, but essentially those will be the construction of bridges completely over our facility, so they won't have any impact to the delivery system. So, but no, everything has gone well. We finished, like I said, the 20 of them, and contractors are coming along really well. It was a good off-season, so we should be wrapping up next week to get ready.
That's it?
That's it. Any questions?
I'm sure they'll all be out by the time the water gets here.
The end of next week, they should all be finished up, the two remaining, it's got the wasteway and the sewer line. They're bores, the one on the north loop is a bore underneath, east of lateral, so that's not an active.
All right, Pedro, you're on.
Good morning. Well, we're trying to complete most of our projects and trying to get gear up here for water. So far, right now, we've been concentrating on building new chickens and on the turnout repairs. I have a lot of leaky turnouts out there that water users have been calling me and complaining about. So I've got 2 crews right now doing turnouts and 1 crew doing check gates, along with all these other projects that we're trying to complete.
It's Windows 10.
All the mowers are out and running. Herbicide trucks are both out and going. Unfortunately, they weren't able to go out today, and the way it looks, won't be able to go out for the rest of the week because of the winds.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, we're continuing to work on the wells. Right now, we're looking, I got with Mr. Reyes yesterday, and we're looking at sleeving another 2 wells. That'll be Franklin Feeder 8 and Franklin Feeder 6. And there is a picture in here on Franklin Feeder 8, just to give you an idea of how some of our pumps are coming out of it. They're eating up pretty bad.
Oh, it's ugly.
Yeah, they're getting eaten up pretty bad. That's,
Oh, boy.
that's the impeller on the one from Franklin Feeder 8.
That's one of the bowl sections.
Yes, sir. So that's down at S&S Welding right now, getting rebuilt.
That's not much of an impeller.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
It's in pretty bad shape. And
they don't rebuild the impellers themselves, do they?
No,
I mean,
And the pump there, I mean, it's kind of easy to figure out why it ain't pumping.
holy moly.
So, yeah, it's a pretty bad shape. So they're getting rebuilt. These 2 wells get sleeved, and we'll put the pumps back in. These are pretty good producers, so we're expecting that we'll be able to save these 2 wells.
Most of your sleeves are in this, when we were drilling those, we used that screening, is that, it's finally deteriorating, is that what it is?
should be.
On the casing?
Yes.
So that's why you're sleeving? Okay.
And we are sleeving them well because the casing is also fairly thin. I believe there were just what we call temporary wells up.
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah.
Cheapest casing I could find.
That's right.
In no
That's
3.
right.
Right, so we're going to a thicker casing, we're going to a larger gravel, and it seems to be working pretty good. I mean, we're getting some pretty good production out of the wells that we've sleeved so far.
So those patterns are abrasive, they're not, there is some corrosion going on clearly, but those are abrasive. That's pumping sand.
Sand.
Some gravel, yes.
Yeah, those are classic, when you see those, that's like it's been sandblasting. That's where the sand hits on the inside of the impeller, so those are sandblasted holes. Corrosion, but there's corrosion too. That's some corrosives which say there may be electrolysis problem in
It's not that bacteria.
it. It looks like it's bacteria on these, because
Does it
it's got the
smell like-
black tar on the outside of
Did it
it.
smell like,
You get, were they
Pretty thick.
thinking?
Yeah, pretty thick.
they smell real
Yeah,
bad?
these don't,
Yeah,
they smell
that's-
nasty. Yeah.
That's that bacteria working on.
Here are a couple of pictures just of before and after pictures of our drains, on some of the drains that we've gone out there and cleaned. We can go through these pretty fast though.
By the way, that bacteria lead to stainless steel. It's like-
Do they really?
Yeah, some of our sensors have been destroyed by it.
That's amazing.
It is. Not sure what you can get.
These pictures are pretty much at the same location, before and after.
They going the right way?
Yeah, you're going right.
Wow.
I recognize that.
And this is without train, and this is with train.
And then, of course, our drain mowers out inside the drains within the city of El Paso, keeping up with our obligation of keeping these drains clean.
Did he make it through?
Yeah.
I'll be done.
Also, we're doing, I've got all backhoes out and about. We are redigging some of our canals that Robert's been having trouble with. This is actually up there in the upper valley. We're straightening out the Montoya. We're straightening out the Montoya main. There's a section there that has shifted so bad, we're actually having to cut about 6 feet off of one side and move it over to the other side. I've actually got turnouts that are buried 6 feet inside the bank. And I think you're familiar with what, right?
Yeah, trying to figure out where that.
So yeah, we're working on those right now. Let's keep on the equipment there. Again, replacing check gates, we've done so far 11 that we've replaced. I still have a good 20 to go, and some of the channel that also needs to be replaced. So I know I ain't gonna be able to get it all done this year, but we're gonna try to get most of them. Turnout repairs, and also we've got a 3-man crew of just cutting down trees that hitting our equipment, and a lot of complaints on trees, especially with these winds. We've been losing a lot of trees.
So a lot of these are dead trees like that.
Yes. Yeah, this is just right here down the road, so then again, we mulch it and we use it on top of our banks. This is, I showed you this, the last board meeting, on the Montoya. We weren't completed with it yet. The drain portion has been, well, actually, this has all been completed. At this time, the drain portion was about 90% complete. Go to the next picture now. And this is where we're putting the canal over the drain to make it back operational. We're putting the rebar and getting ready for shotcrete. It's that same site, and then the next picture with the shotcrete, and after we've cleaned up and walked away from it. This next picture is actually on the T216. One of our farmers requested and paid for a crossing. So we dropped a culvert, a 48-inch culvert here, and shotcrete all the way back to the existing concrete. And we did 25 feet on the downstream side. Again, this was all paid by the farmer. This next one is also another crossing that was paid by a farmer. This is over by check 20. This is just right before you go into Daddy's area down there. And same scenario, we dropped a 90-inch pipe in Tornillo Canal, shotcrete all the way to the existing checks, and 25 feet downstream from it.
So do you put steel in that pad?
Not in this, not in on the shotcrete, not in this one.
A fiber?
Yeah, just the fiber. We ordered the concrete with fiber. And we're using the same specs that
But
you
on
have.
the driveway pad?
Yes,
It's got steel?
yes, it's got
Okay,
steel,
that's what
yes,
I'm
sir.
saying. Yeah, because that one happens to be so shallow, is what
Yes, yeah, no, it's got steel. And the pipe is actually 2 sacked all the way to the top.
Oh, okay. That should not go anyplace.
Yeah, and it's got number 5 steel in it.
That's a good crossing
Brand new.
then. Yeah, but even, to the extent that we can handle those as culverts, it's done this way compared to, I mean, this is a 75-year crossing.
Right.
Compared to the problems we've had with those other ones.
5 years.
Yeah, well, before it shows signs of problem.
And then here we got a flume going over one of our drains. This actually goes over the Tornillo drain. As you can see, the hole on this side, this was actually caused by the farmer. He went over there with his equipment, actually got the chisels caught on it. So when he called me, I went ahead in there and replaced the pipe, and I charged him for all 2 sec. Because I just don't want this to happen again. Apparently this pipe sits so high that I don't have the cover. I did put about a 2-foot cover over the top of it, but I did 2 sack it all the way through, and you'll see it on the next picture. It has been 2 sacked all the way to the top. Then we went ahead and backfilled, put about a 2-foot pump over the top. Next one is a couple of pictures of some farmer crossings. This one is over the Mesa Drain, the old Columbus Brown farm. And this is to go out to the back of the sand hills in the back. This is the only crossing they got to go back there. And as you can see, it was in very good shape, so So it was blocked off, and again, farmer paid for the pipe, we went in there and replaced it.
In good shape.
And that's the abatement case not working very well, is it?
No. It is going to the ground, and the next picture kind of shows it after it's been completed, and then this abatement gate put back in. This is on the method drain also by Worsham. On this one here, I don't know if you guys remember, back in about July, I guess, of last year, the drain underneath failed, and we had to go in there and drop some poles and support the Y303 over the top of the drain. Well, they managed to make it through the year, so City of Socorro paid for all the pipe to replace this culvert here.
Over the street.
Over the street. Yeah, the street crossing. Yes. And right now, we're in the process of putting the Y303 back into play. Wasteway had to be removed, so Wasteway was also replaced.
And a mysterious line.
Yes, that's actually a water